Kate Lansing, welcome back to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I'm excited to be here.
Number 3 in your series just came out. I think we're talking just maybe a couple weeks after the launch.
Yeah, it was just last week, last Tuesday. Book 3 of my Colorado wine mystery series, Mulled to Death, just came out. So very excited.
Are there enough puns? Are there enough puns in the world for you?
Oh, never. I love puns. In fact, in writing these books, I actually keep a separate Word document on my desktop that is grape and wine puns that come to me or metaphors or just random facts. And so whenever I'm writing or having to come up with a title or something, I usually open that up and start there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have that list handy? Do you have any in your head for future titles?
Oh, well, the next title of book 4 we just came up with a couple weeks ago, my editor and I, and it is Till Death Do Us Port.
Oh, God. That's painful. That's painful.
I know. Well, I had initially pitched something barreled, something Bordeaux or something like that. It's all kind of a wedding theme, and I had gone through, there were even worse ones. This one, Till Death Do Us Port, kind of had a nice ring to it. I was like, all right. There were some terrible ones that we went through. Yeah.
And for those who don't know, give us the first 2 titles in the series.
Yeah. The first book is Killer Chardonnay, and the second book is A Pairing to Die For, like food and wine pairings. So the books follow a winemaker in Boulder, Colorado, who has her own winery. She's a new winery owner, and I guess she expertly pairs wine with solving murders in Boulder. Although Mulled to Death actually took place up in the mountains, so that was a little fun, a little escape. So,
did you create a fictional mountain town, or did you choose something real?
No, fictional. It's all fictional in my own brain, but I have some of my favorite resorts. I'm a native, so I've kind of grown up going to the different ski resorts. So I think it's sort of this strange combination of a few of like, oh, I like this from this one and this from this one, and you just kind of merge them all together into this idealized resort for this book, which is great fun.
Because in the past you have actually used real streets and scenes in Boulder, correct?
Mm-hmm. I do,
yeah. And then you just fictionalize things within there. But so you obviously have a real world that, real in your book that, kind of bounces off real landmarks. And then you just simply go in, create your own towns or villages as you need.
Oh, yeah. And this book, just for example, the opening chapter takes place on I-70, right? Because I-70 is so infamous in Colorado, that ski traffic to get up to the mountains. I thought I have to open it here. They're in a hurry, and of course they get stuck because there's always traffic. And so real interstate, real traffic, and but then a completely fictionalized resort. Yeah.
So give us the setup of this one. Give us the what does Parker encounter?
Yeah, so this one, Parker and her boyfriend Reed, who is a chef in Boulder, and they've kind of met and started dating in the first 2 books. They are off for a weekend getaway, and along with them, Parker's brother and Parker's best friend, who also happen to be dating, are going with them. So it's sort of this quartet of close friends that are heading up for this weekend. Fun and skiing and snowboarding. And Parker is hoping to mix a little business with pleasure. She wants to pitch her malling spices and her snowy day Syrah that she makes, and try and get footholds up in the ski resorts for her business. And of course, when she's there, the owner of the ski resort, it was a lot of fun coming up with some of these facts, but she's a former Olympian who now owns this resort and just very famous and very big. And she ends up, of course, somebody has to meet their end here in this book. It is a murder mystery, but Parker witnesses this former ski Olympian have an accident on the slopes, on a treacherous slope, and it doesn't quite seem entirely like an accident to Parker, so she starts to investigate. So that's sort of the setup.
As she is wont to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. She likes to stick her nose in other people's business.
Yeah. Yeah. You get a lot of credit, and I think we've talked about this before, but I noticed again with the reviews on the new one, which are already rolling in at a quite healthy pace, that you get a lot of credit for your minor, quote unquote, minor characters, your non-featured main protagonist. Would it be fair to say that your protagonist is only as strong as, the cast of characters around her? I mean, in some ways.
Absolutely. And I'll say, I think sometimes it's fun to use the cast of characters, the other characters you have, to help elevate the main character even more. So, Sage is Parker's best friend, but they're opposites in a lot of ways, which I think they play off of each other really well. And Liam is her brother, and in some ways he's kind of a slacker and kind of a hot mess. But in other ways, he challenges her, like, hey, don't work all the time. In this book, she's like all about working or sleuthing, and he's like, will you please take it easy? And it's kind of fun to figure out how is this character, and even the suspects or characters that aren't necessarily in the whole series, but even just in this book, how can this character challenge Parker and what she wants? And that elevates that character arc from the beginning to the end, because in every individual installment, Parker has to learn something and has to grow. So you're absolutely right. I think the main protagonist is only as strong as some of the other cast of characters that's there with her.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast about screenwriting actually today, and they had a really interesting discussion about characters' blind spots. And that is, what is it about ourselves that we don't see and or choose to ignore, I guess might be another way of thinking the same thing. But that the minor characters, the other characters floating around that character, can help the reader see the character a little more vividly and in full 3 dimension. I think it's sort of like watching a movie of yourself, and you don't quite know how you move through a room until you see that movie of that, what you think is an ordinary moment or something. But it is interesting how the rest of a cast can help illuminate all the aspects of a character just on their commentary.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I think that's 100% true. It's really fun. It's the funnest moment is always when the main character, it finally dawns on them. They have that like heart to heart conversation, maybe with a best friend or something, and then they go, "Oh, I guess I do that." Like I'm not, they realize that. I love that moment of realization sometimes, which I do think is kind of cool, and I tend to have one in each book because I think it's interesting, that self-awareness of, oh, I do that. And that does make them more 3-dimensional because we all have blind spots in real life. Yeah.
Do you struggle at all, or is it getting easier to come up with the actual murder mystery elements of how Parker's going to solve the murder, what are the right series of clues, how is she going to get misdirected? Because we all, murder mystery fans, we all expect our protagonist won't just be on the trail from the moment the book starts until the moment it finishes. You've got to divert and lead off. Is it getting easier to figure all that stuff out?
In some ways, I think it's getting easier. I've learned how to obfuscate, I guess, just add confusion to clues and to what's happening through the books. That was something my editor worked on me with in the first book through our revision process. So then it's something I continue to kind of just do a little bit better. What clues are going to be planted where, including red herrings, ties to different characters. And then even just the murder itself, how does it happen? And what is the aha moment going to be? And the reveal, all of these things, that all does get a little bit easier. Also, because I've already done some in prior books, I want to keep it fresh. And so whenever I go into writing a new manuscript, I'm like, well, what do I want? What do I feel like doing this time? So for the third book, I actually went into it knowing I really wanted to highlight my favorite mystery trope. I wanted to give it a shot. And it's that Hercule Poirot moment where he gathers everybody around and then slowly goes around the room and says, well, you didn't do it, and eliminates them until getting to the actual culprit. So in that way, I kind of, as I go into manuscripts or into new projects, it's easier in that I kind of usually know, oh, let's try this. That sounds fun. But at the same time, it's harder because I've done a lot of stuff in these. I'm working on my fourth one now. So I want to keep it fresh. So you can't reuse something I've already done. So in that way, it's harder.
Yeah.
You got to work. Yeah. Keep coming up with new things.
Yeah. Yeah. What about Parker and her arc? If you think back to writing that first book, are you just looking at an internal arc within each book and, learning something, becoming more aware as a protagonist with each book, or is there an overarching arc that you're also working toward?
A little bit of both. So most of the time, I will say each book can be read independently or individually. Because that's important especially for cozies. And so within each one, there is a unique one that you don't have, that's just for that book. That's something she learns. That being said, in this book, in the first book, I introduced the idea of this aunt that Parker loved and was very close to, and who unfortunately passed away and left her some money, which helped her, like the backing for her winery. She is very young, and she was able to open it when she did because of this aunt and her support. And in this book, specifically, I really have Parker wrestle with some of that grief and grow in a way that it kind of built through books 1 and 2. And then this one, I have a really kind of wrestle with it. And so that was kind of fun to show more of this overarching one. And then in the next book, I'm sort of building on top of that a little bit for her, although there is an individual arc in that one too. So a little bit of both. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you gone back to, like, when you need material and maybe you planted something in the first or second book that you didn't know would become something useful to build upon? It just sort of came out and you went back and said, oh, this I can develop in a whole new way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely things that have come up that way. So Liam, the brother, is really into photography in the first book. And it's sort of, he's a hobby hopper. And so in the first book, Parker kind of gives him a hard time. Like, oh, now it's photography. Last month it was, painting, and then podcasts, and then da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and on and on and on and on. And so she kind of gives him a hard time, but then at the end has to accept, like, oh, he actually is into it. And that was one that's been really fun to go back to and lean on, because I like to show him upping his photography and continuing down that path. I am working on the fourth book. So I spent the third books up in the mountains away from Boulder and away from Parker's winery. And I'm finding it really interesting and kind of humorous how much I'm having to go back to the first and the second books now that I'm back in Boulder. Yeah. You don't realize it's like you need a series encyclopedia to make sure I'm not changing too much about what I established before. Yeah.
Right. What about Parker's romantic future? Do you have that all planned out?
I do. Yeah, the next book is called Till Death Do Us Part, but she is not getting married. Nobody in the main cast is getting married. It just happens to be at a wedding. But that stirs up a lot of romantic feelings when you are, in a relationship that may or may not be forever, and you're kind of thinking about it. It's been fun to show that contrast for Parker of she is helping out with this wedding. Of course, she's providing the libations, but she's also thinking about her own relationship a lot. And I do love the pairing I have with the chef and the winemaker. There's something really fun, and I like their chemistry. And there's always conflict and strife in relationships, and so
sure.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I have it mapped out.
Yeah. So how long ago did Killer Chardonnay come out? Remind me.
May of 2020.
Right.
May 26th.
A couple of months into the pandemic. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So is there any reference in the subsequent books to the pandemic? Or are you you're just treating that like it just is in another world?
It's in another world. And that was actually a discussion that I had with my editor. So we had that before going in, especially to the fourth book. The third book, I started writing it was actually right as everything shut down. My family and I actually took a trip up to the mountains on Valentine's Day of 2020. to go skiing, and it's so that I could do a little research, right? And,
So, tax
with air
write-off.
quotes, with air quotes, research.
Tax
'Cause
write-off.
it's fun.
We get it.
But where was I going with that? Oh, so I started writing it. I mean, I was writing it in 2020, so it would have been tough to incorporate the pandemic.
Right.
So this is going into the fourth book was really the first time it was sort of a conscious, like, is this something we want to include? And my editor and I both said, let's just have Parker live in a world where the pandemic doesn't exist. I think cozy readers, you're looking for an escape in part. And so that's a part of it. And then it's also just, well, the rest of the series has been grounded before the pandemic. Let's not change things up too much. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay not writing about the pandemic yet. Maybe next book. I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's not in here. It's an ideal world where it never happened.
Yeah. I'm wondering if in writing these books, you've gotten to know your audience better, do you think?
Absolutely. 100%. I always thought I knew the audience of cozy readers too, right? It's kind of funny, but then you learn so much about the readers. And as you get reviews, I know a lot of authors are like, I don't read reviews. I actually sometimes like to, just so that I know what people are enjoying or if there's something I can do better on the next one, because I'm always looking for ways to continue to improve. And I think cozy readers, it's been amazing to me how much they love, and this is going to sound like a joke, and it half is, but they love their pets. Cozy readers love their cats. Like I have been amazed at how many people have loved the cat characters in these books. And so then of course I'm like, I'm going to do more cats. Let's add more, That's great because I love it. But there's also just the cozy reader, they are very specific about what they love reading and what they love about cozies, the community, the pluckiness of the amateur sleuth. And there's the hook, the niche. But there's all of these things that make it what it is. They don't like swear words. I learned that. It's kind of funny. Like I used like 2 in the first book, and I've slowly tapped that down and use less. Now they just swear under their breath instead of actually putting it in dialogue. But I've learned a lot about the audience, and it's been really cool.
Mm-hmm. Maybe your challenge is to come up with a pun that is the Venn diagram between cats and wine, where you can find a pun that would work in both.
Oh, I love that.
There you go. That's your challenge, and maybe
that's my challenge.
Yeah. So how would you work in cats around a wine? Yeah, I know that's easy to work the actual cats, and I was just trying to think of maybe she has a new label or something. I don't know.
Oh, she should have a label that is all about a cat. Well, see, her cat's name is Zin, short for Zinfandel.
Yeah.
So I've got that, but it needs to go the other way now. I need to have it incorporated into the wine.
Yeah.
Catty Cabernet.
Yeah.
I don't know.
See? There you go.
Yeah.
Wow. So has your sort of production schedule changed, your daily habits very much now that you're just having to, you've got deadlines, you've got to crank these out. What's changed? What did your writing world look like 6 months before Killer Chardonnay came out and today?
Today it's a lot more haphazard. Although now, I've heard it referred to as the grind. You kind of get used to the grind of deadlines, of always working on something, and you kind of get in writing shape where you're used to outputting 500 to 1,000 words, which is my goal for a first draft in a day. And you kind of get used to that. So I will say I'm still doing that. I was doing that before. My life before Killer Chardonnay came out, my writing, I was working full time with a young kid in preschool and kind of trying to juggle. I was new then, trying to juggle deadlines, and that didn't go on for very long before I realized I needed to. I was in a position, luckily, where I could quit my day job, and so then I was able to do full-time writing. These days, it's almost laughable because, my daughter, we've had her in preschool and then out and then in and then out. And then you just kind of get used to juggling and being really flexible. And, so I work, when I'm on a deadline, I have a hard time sleeping in. I'm one of those people, I get up at like 4:30, 5, and I'm like, all right, let's get some words on the page. And that way it really gets my brain going right away so that I'm thinking about it, even if I'm out doing other things or working on other stuff or with my daughter. And then whenever I get a chance to sit back down, I'm ready to go. So yeah, I guess I try and squeeze writing in whenever I can. Almost.
Yeah. Do you jot down notes when you're out and about?
Yes. I use the notes app on my phone a ton. I do carry notebooks too, but I find I always have my phone in my pocket, right? We're at that, in that era. And so I have my notes app that I'll jot ideas down or sentences that I think are cool. And yeah. Do you do that too?
Oh, absolutely. And send myself emails. I'll just dial up my email thing and just send it so I can see it right there when I get back. And sometimes I will just put it in the notes. And sometimes if the idea is so good, you don't need a note because it's such a great idea, you'll never forget it. And just some sort of observation or detail that's really going to move the story forward somehow, some way. So, yep. So, book 3 just came out. Book 4 is already done. No.
I'm finishing up the draft. I have a deadline. I'm working on it now. I still have a couple months, which means I'm almost done with the first draft. And so then I have the polishing and the revising that I think makes it shine and really brings all of the elements together. And that book will come out fall of next year. So
okay.
Yeah, right. So I'll be wrapping it up in the next couple of months and sending it to my editor.
And do we know any discussions about beyond that?
No, nothing yet. And I don't expect to hear anything about that maybe until next summer. It seems like there's sort of this lag of see how book 3 does and pre-orders for book 4. And so I'm not holding my breath. It would be awesome if there's a book 5. In fact, of course, this is the way I operate. Like, I already know what would happen in a book 5 because I can already see that far out for Parker, like exactly where she's going to be after this. So, it would be fun if there's a book 5. I've got lots of ideas, but we'll wait. We'll see. Wait and see.
Will you start writing that, even if just to be ahead of the game, or will you wait?
I will wait. And this is why, is because I found that for a lot of writers, and this is one of my favorite bits of writing advice that I remember getting when I was a writer just starting out, but it's while you're waiting is a great time to work on another project and get excited about something else. And I do find it fascinating that at every level of writing, maybe Stephen King doesn't worry about the waiting so much anymore, but for the most part, no matter where you are, there's some level of waiting involved. And you kind of get used to, like, I'm going to make the most of this time. And so, when I was waiting to hear if there would be a book 4, I actually wrote another manuscript, that will go on submission maybe next year for a completely different genre and everything. But it was kind of fun to work on something different. And I actually have an idea for another project that once I turn this one in, I'll probably just start poking at that until I hear otherwise. Because you never know what comes of those projects, that you do work on during those times.
That's great advice. Can you tell us a little bit about the other project that is going out on submission?
Yeah, it's a young adult contemporary mystery, and I'm excited about it. It delves into the stigma of mental illness, which is something that means a lot to me, having grown up with a brother who was mentally ill, and this was finally a way for me to sort of process some of that. And it was fun, and it takes place in Evergreen, which is where I grew up, so it was kind of fun to go back there. I don't know why, I keep setting books in Colorado. I just love it here. But yeah, it's a little bit of a darker story too, a little bit edgier. I think I was excited to sink my teeth into something a little meatier after working on these cozies, and this was sort of, I had turned in book 3, and I thought, let's dive into this project. The idea had been percolating. I had first started it back in 2017 or 2018, and then that's how these projects work, right? And then you pick them up, dust them off, and think it's finally time. Let's do this.
Right.
So that's that one.
Yeah. Can you just briefly tell us about your brother and just what themes and elements were you trying to get at?
Yeah. So he died by suicide. It's been about 5.5 years ago. And, their grief of suicide, I think, is very different, and growing up with he was bipolar, and so kind of growing up around that and loving somebody and having to, it's hard. There's a lot of challenges to it, And I wanted to, I think there's always been this part of me, I've appreciated how people are talking more openly about mental health right now. And it was like, let's do my part, let's do what I can do, kind of share some of my story. And so the book takes the narrator, it's actually twins, and my brother and I are not twins. We were 5 years apart, right? But so it's not me, and it eventually became definitely not me, which is always the fun part about writing a fictional story, is the character ends up taking on this life of her own. But she is the twin, and her brother is bipolar, and he ends up dying in a car accident. But there's this the police sort of jump to suicide because they find out about his mental illness, and so she thinks it's unfair that they went there so fast. It's like sometimes that is the explanation, and that happened a little bit with my brother too. And so it was this like way for me to sort of process, and it really did. I find writing to be very therapeutic, and it was a very healthy process for me. And so now I have this manuscript, this story, and who knows if it'll go anywhere, but it has a special place in my heart. Yeah. So that's a little more about it.
And it sounds like, not that I know Parker's whole journey at all, and I don't, but it sounds like this young adult story novel deals with heavier emotions and, like you said.
It does.
Yeah. Wow.
It does a little bit. It has a different tone. There's still humor because I can't help myself. Yeah. There's still a cat. There are these things that it's definitely me, but it is a little bit darker.
Yeah. What's the working title on that one, if you don't mind?
Just Another Manic Murder. I had the hardest time coming up with a title. I do not know that will stick, but it was playful and enough, and it hit on the mania, like the manicness, and the question of is it murder or not. So we'll see.
Now, are the cozies go through an agent to your publisher, and the same agent for the YA?
Yes. Yeah. When I first connected with my agent, when we first had that phone call, where she offered rep, I kind of asked her, because I've always enjoyed writing and dabbling with YA. And so I asked her, well, do you represent other genres? And she said, yes. And I'm very happy. She's excited about this new project too, which is always nice. Yeah. So she's very supportive. I've lucked out with my agent. We have a great working relationship. Yeah.
And it's already out on submission or about to go out?
No, it'll go out early next year, I think is what our plan is. So we're kind of you have to get a whole package ready. When writers go out to query agents, it's almost like that when you have to go and query like editors and publishers as well. So I'll be writing the query letter and the pitch and then a synopsis, and then you kind of put it all together. My agent will help, make sure it's all shiny, as good as it can be, and who knows. But it is interesting being, I never really knew when I was first starting out writing that was the case. So just kind of sharing in case there's anyone else out there who finds it interesting. You think you get an agent and that's it. No, you still have to, hone those skills a little bit.
Yep. And just, is there a way to give a shout out to your agent and or editor?
Yeah, so Pamela Hardy is my agent. She's with the Night Agency, and she's fantastic. The Night Agency in general has been so wonderful to work with. They're great. So anyone out there looking for an agent, I highly recommend them. And my editor is incredible too. Her name is Miranda Hill, and she is with Berkley. And yeah, I've been just so impressed. My editor's brilliant. As with all editors, I'm sure like 99% of her feedback, I'm like, oh, that's so good. Why didn't I think of that? Like I have to do that.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, you must just, sometimes I think you must just blink and think back to the pre-published days and appreciate how far you've come.
Yeah, it's funny how it happens though, right? Because the bar just keeps raising and you keep making goals for yourself, and it's easy to forget where you were. But I do remember, we've known each other now for a long time. I don't even know how long when we met at the Rocky Mountain Mystery Writers. It's probably been like a decade. But yeah, I spent a lot of time in the query trenches and, and working my way up, and it's really fun to be kind of, living the dream.
Yeah. It's good to know that work paid off, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep. It really can. It really can.
Yeah. Excellent, Kate. Well, congratulations. And as we always do, we'd just like to give our guests a chance to, promote an author, a writer, or maybe even just one book at the end here, just to pay it forward a little bit.
Absolutely. So I have to talk about Cynthia Kuhn is another local Colorado cozy mystery author, and she has a brand new series coming out December. And I was lucky enough to get an early copy of it.
Geez, how'd you manage that, Kate?
Well, I'm on NetGalley.
Yeah.
I went on NetGalley and I requested it. I was like, oh, I hope I get it. Fingers crossed. And I did. And I was really excited to be approved. And so I read it, and it's brilliant. And it's called How to Book a Murder. And it's the first in a new cozy series that takes place in Colorado. And Cynthia is just such a great writer and a fun writer. And her mysteries are always, keep me guessing until the end. And so I highly recommend it. Watch out for it in December.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I just only had a chance to shout at her across the way at Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Conference. I didn't really get a chance to sit down and chat with her, but she is a blast. Well, Kate Lansing, thank you so much. Good luck with Mulled to Death.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks so much. You're such a great host. I always have so much fun coming on the podcast.
Yeah, it's easy to chat with you anytime. Take care. We'll talk again soon.
Yep. All right. Sounds good. Bye.